Hello everybody, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn and I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com for the global MedComms community. So that's people who work in and around medical education, medical communications, medical publishing. We're meeting today online during the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of us have been in lockdown for 4 months or more. Meetings, events, activity has been disrupted massively with a rush to go virtual. Lots of questions remain about quite how this will pan out, but today we wanted to take stock of where we are, share some insights and thoughts about what's happening and what the future might hold. So in this session, we're going to talk about whether the face-to-face meeting is essentially dead, but that's calling for a paradigm shift in the way that humans behave and like to interact. So is the future more about blended formats? If so, what are the additional practical complexities? So I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Handforth and his panel of guests for what should be a very interesting discussion. And we're inviting our online audience to send in comments, observations and questions. So panelists, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, and Mark, I'm going to hand over to you to lead the way. Thanks.
Fantastic. So let's get cracking. We'll introduce ourselves in a second, but something occurred to me today, in fact, that this gathering that we're currently doing, which I think, if memory serves, we're currently about 136 people. If we took the UK as a marketplace, could not take place face-to-face. So to answer your question of a second ago, Peter, is the face-to-face meeting dead? Well, actually, yes, today it is. And the reality is we cannot meet as we did previous to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's a big topic. We have 45 minutes. I think something that occurred to me also today was a simple fact that the meetings discipline is something which we've kind of perfected. Whether we believe the perfection was optimal or whether there was still work in progress, over the last decades, many of them, we have perfected what we think the meeting environment looks like. So essentially, we have 45 minutes to reimagine what has been perfected over decades, which is no mighty task indeed. So let's go straight away to the panel. Here in front of you, you should be able to see any second. There you go. You should be able to see their business titles. I'll start with me first and just quickly explain about my day-to-day. You can see the background, which amounts to roughly 30 years involved in specifically healthcare meetings and events. And I have two businesses, one a meeting consultancy, which helps people sharpen and devise meeting strategy. And the second one, which is related to a platform which assesses venues from a compliance point of view and helps them promote themselves appropriately. That's healthcarevenues.com. A little side point is that in the last few weeks, healthcare venues seems to be Googled regularly by people looking for things other than it was first intentioned. And we now find ourselves auditing venues, not just from a compliance point of view, but also from a COVID-19 point of view. And I'm going to share some of those thoughts with you today. Now, let's get to the talent and the three people you can see in front of you. Alex, do you want to present yourself first?
Lovely. Hi, everybody. So yes, I am currently the head of workplace wellbeing for a large corporate in central London. My background is as a psychologist and actually also a psychotherapist. And I started my career probably about 25 years ago, actually as a market researcher as well. After I qualified. So I'm actually finding this time really, really interesting, trying to unpick actually what is working for us and what is not. As a psychologist, I tend to work with people mostly on a one-to-one basis or in teams, and 80% of that historically has probably been in a face-to-face environment. You know, my work constantly depends on building up some kind of rapport in the, you know, in actual physical interaction. So thinking about how I now work, and for a lot of my colleagues as well, has been quite a challenge. So yeah, I'm interested to see what other people think about this as well.
We asked you not because of your background in healthcare meetings and events, which you do not have, but we just genuinely felt there were so many unknowns, and with a very human creature, which is the physical meeting, that having somebody who could look at it at that human level would really enable us to balance out. So we're not going to task you with understanding some of the minute detail of healthcare meetings and events, but look at it at that human perspective. Stephane, do you want to fire away next? And do tell us about your location. Many of the people here are located mostly in the UK, so they will be, you know, impressed with your exotic location at the same time.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephane Dazet. I'm currently heading up the Business Development and Events Department at ESL, the European Association for the Study of the Liver. I fall in love with the south of France, where I'm currently having my vacation now, and as well started my career in meeting events and congresses. I'm a 50% guy. I spent almost 9 years at the European Society of Cardiology, then moved almost 3 years in the agency world, pharma division and PCO division, to move then to a pharma company, Actelion, acquired by J&J, and now I'm back to the association world.
Fantastic, and clearly the reason for your invitation was that 360-degree perspective, both from a commercial point of view, being in an agency, all the way through to the corporate and now medical society. So thank you. And finally, he's disappeared off the screen, but you can see him, so you can't avoid that. Andrew, are you with us?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not in exotic south of France, unfortunately. I'm in a grey, damp Yorkshire at the moment, but we're delighted to be part of the team this afternoon. Very quick potted history. I've been in the events industry for 30 years. The majority of that time has been spent working with healthcare clients, life sciences clients, in delivering a whole portfolio of meetings and events. So I've been to lots of different congresses around the world, worked with over 45 different healthcare companies in this space, and obviously looking in and sort of with an open view in terms of what's been evolving over the last 3-4 months in the meeting space and the impact that COVID-19 is having.
And as the smart ones amongst us will already realise, you and I work together, Andrew. You're the smart one, hence the reason you're answering the questions, and I'm the less smart one, hence the reason I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, and I noticed there's 1 or 2 people on the attendee list that we know well as well, which is good to see.
Indeed, thank you. So brilliant. Let's get a move on. So we're not doing a presentation, but we are going to maybe use some assets just to guide us along the way, keeping an eye on time as well at the same time. So let's kick off and jump straight into it. I thought we did a rehearsal, hence the reason we heard Stephane's dog barking yesterday. And one of the things we decided to do was to have a certain amount of flow to this, so we can try and have a constructive conversation. And I guess the first question, which I'm going to address to Alex, is really about the topic itself and this idea of face-to-face events and what might a new normal look like. And ask her first, what sticks in your mind when you think about that topic?
So I was really excited actually when you asked me to come and join this, because I think what you actually said was, is the face-to-face meeting dead? And the thing that I was thinking of is, we've talked before, and as a psychologist, what I've discussed with you is this idea that actually human beings, from even when we're in the womb, are wired for this physical connection. The neuropsychology of our brains is developed so that we can actually, for our own survival, be able to understand other human beings. Now that, from a psychological point of view, very, very much is facilitated by actually physically being with somebody. So the face-to-face meeting, there are so many things that we are all constantly unconsciously picking up in the kind of non-verbals. And what I'm finding, particularly with my work, and I'm sure lots of other people in the healthcare industry are finding this as well, is that it's actually really quite difficult and quite tiring to be on constant Zoom meetings where you're not getting that kind of feedback. You're having to do a lot of kind of additional work to try and figure out what people are actually saying, how they're feeling, etc. And I think that puts quite a lot of cognitive demand on people. And what I'm seeing anyway, and I don't know whether some of you are seeing it as well, is that it's actually really heightening some of our physical tells. So, for example, at the end of Zoom meetings, I don't know if any of you are finding this, but people are very obviously saying bye and waving and things in a way that you would never normally do in a face-to-face meeting. So I don't think the face-to-face meeting is dead at all, but it's now that we're forced into this situation, it's what can we learn in the virtual space that's going to really help us connect with that human side still.
Perfect. Stephane, from your point of view, what struck you with this topic title? And let's be specific around the medical society environment, and maybe consider how you value meetings.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Actually, your question was provocative enough that I was really happy to join you there. Definitely, the end of face-to-face meeting, for me, it's a clear no-go. Not because ESL needs it, but I strongly believe into it, and definitely attending the final game is key. So when you have a major congress organized one time a year, as long as the content is high level, you will attract people, and that will then bring, I would say, currently we need to adapt due to the situation, and we have been pushed, I would say, to be innovative. So this is where I would say that I'm also fascinated by the pharma, because if they want to survive, they need to develop a drug, they need to push the research. And we are currently in this corner now. As a medical association, we have to not reinvent, but adapt and develop our education offerings, actually. So this is really challenging, and new congress type will pop up, definitely, if we want to make it happen and keep the audience interested in attending it.
And just a point of clarification, because I'm sure people will be thinking, ESL has pivoted from a face-to-face meeting this year to a virtual one, which I believe is in August.
Correct. We had to cancel it at the first stage. We postponed it from April to August, and then realistically speaking, we had to transfer it to a digital format. But we have not, I would say, done it on our own. There was a lot of communication with the pharma industry and the medtech industry, and I would say this is all together that we have taken the decision. And if we want to share education, science, advocacy, which are the three pillars of ESL, we have no other choice than using the technology currently. That was the main driver. All together, we have taken the decision.
And as quick as you can, was it an easy decision to make, or did it take some while to make that decision? And was there a particular driver? Was there a particular government requirement that pushed you to go virtual?
Actually, we were supposed to have the congress at Excel London. So Excel London have been transformed into a field hospital. So the decision was clear that we might not be able to use it, and the decision has not been so easy, because again we had to involve our main partners, taking clear facts, then security as well was one of those, to ensure that everyone can be safe home, because even if it would have been cleaned up, some people was kind hesitant to travel, and we didn't know how it will be, honestly, in August. And would it be in full speed? Will we be able to open the door and attract as much people as planned? Not sure. So the best decision was definitely to move to digital, and all our industry supported us in this sense.
Well, let's turn to Andrew now with the comment that I guess for ESL there's some definite best practice that you'll be able to have learned from over the last months, delivering a virtual congress in August. That gives you plenty of time to look at the marketplace, which I think is something that's been a constant source of conversation over the last few days, and we'll get into that into the next session. Andrew, do you want to give your thoughts on this, your immediate thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it from a broader perspective than purely the medical congress and the society meetings. I know a lot's been a topic of conversation, as you say, quite a lot over the last few days as well, in particular. For me, there's been a big conversation going on in the live events industry in terms of when will virtual take over from live events. And I'm looking at what's happening with COVID at the moment as, is this a revolution or is this an evolution? And has this evolution been fast-tracked? And I think probably what's happened, you know, since the onset of COVID and you know, the pivoting from face-to-face to virtual events, you know, when I saw this topic, the question is, are face-to-face meetings essentially dead? The answer to that question, I think Alex answered it beautifully, is the answer to that question is no. You know, it's built in our DNA to actually get these face-to-face meetings kick-started as soon as possible. But I think the landscape of the live events industry has certainly changed. And I think, you know, we're going to be talking about that over the coming minutes, you know, over this session as well. But yeah, it's an interesting period of time, but it's very much an evolution in the fast tracking of face-to-face and multi-channel communications has certainly come to the fore, and the tools that people are using and people have had to learn very quickly through that process as well.
And Andrew, can you give us any insight into how you see certainly the corporate community? So you've explained from the meeting industry point of view, but from a corporate perspective, what do you see?
I've been on a few calls recently. I was with a call with 3 big US corporates, their event planners within their organisations. And what is very clear is the industry in all meeting types have just said, right, 2020, we're not going to be running meetings. Certain meetings we believe will pivot to virtual on an ongoing basis. Advisory boards are an example of that. I think the technology and certain tools allow them to be able to do that. And I think they've seen this as an opportunity to look at their event strategy, look at the technology tools that they're using and how they're being implemented. And it's an opportunity that they've never ever had before to actually assess the return on their investment around live events and their attendance at congresses and their meetings, events, activities on a global scale, because it's literally shut down for 6 months or 12 months of the year. So industry are looking at this as an opportunity to reevaluate their internal comms, their live event strategy, and how they attend congresses in the future as well.
Yeah, no, I tend to echo that. You know, talking to my corporate peers, I think a lot of focus is actually in the immediate and creating that pivot and working with medical societies and reimagining their physical events into the virtual environment. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of a luxury to look into too far into 2021, but we'll come back to that. There was a webinar early on in the lockdown phase. And it was organised by iForPharma. I'm sure many people here might have been part of it. And there was an interesting poll around digital fatigue. And I just need to be clear, I'm a real proponent of virtual interactions. We organise our own webinars. We can, for all the good reasons that a virtual meeting is important, we like that. But I think we do see, and Alex explained it well, around this digital fatigue piece and whether it's a reality. And certainly at this stage, there was a real consensus that felt that there will be a point when, and I'm not sure people can necessarily put a pin into the calendar to say when, that we will get to a point where we can't keep interacting virtually. Does anybody want to throw in any observations? Alex, I think this is squarely in your space, isn't it, about digital fatigue and similar topics?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, I think we've been forced into this situation, and we're all obviously trying to make the best of it. And there are pluses and minuses of it. So I am finding that, if I'm doing some teamwork, for example, or a presentation, then the positives around it are actually, as people have already talked about, there's an equality part here where lots and lots of different people can join that maybe wouldn't have done in the past. Sometimes some of our kind of our face-to-face meetings can be quite exclusive. Now there's a plus and a minus for that, in terms of, as human beings, we really like being part of an in-group who can be part of this lovely society, and when we tend to trust each other more, etc. But that does mean that we're excluding quite a few people as well. So there are plus sides, but on the negative side, I think this fatigue thing, which is I'm finding with a lot of my very, very sort of senior clients, they are ending up in just back-to-back Zoom meetings. They are obviously having to work quite hard to make that human connection, And for those people that are managing teams as well, there's an element that they are finding that it's really quite difficult to keep up with how their teams are functioning in terms of, you know, are they actually being productive, or are they half asleep sometimes? Are they checking their phones, doing all sorts of other things? And I think so there's this thing where it makes us quite tired. And what I'm also having to say to people in terms of how we communicate information and how we keep that connection there with teams, they are having to be a lot more probably quite direct in the questions that they ask people. And I think this applies not just to the kind of work I do, but actually all of the meetings that we have, whether they are, you know, large team meetings, whether they're a congress, etc., is that actually we have to be much more open in actually asking what people want from them, how they're feeling on a kind of much more minute by minute basis, whether they got what they wanted out of it at the end. And then we're having to kind of then make those adaptations and pivot and alter how we do things, quite constantly at the moment.
Yeah, the pace. I mean, I think many people see that question. Either you've got people who have no work or have, you know, even more work, and certainly the infrastructure around meetings and events has gone through a very torrid time with airlines and hotels shut, not operating, and that's been quite significant, you know, quite a significant element to them. Stephane, do you want to add anything in here? Are you seeing any early signs of digital fatigue in your membership? Is it something you're concerned about when planning virtual meetings or physical ones going forward?
Actually, what Alex mentioned, going from, I would say, a Zoom meeting to another was, we all face that. Then from a membership point of view, we are in a time where everyone pick and choose. So we need to have an education offering, science access, everything easy accessible, because we know what we want, and we want it now, not tomorrow, not in 5 seconds. When we have internet connection, we are freaking out. We are less and less patient than in the past. So I think the digital fatigue might come, but now with our laptops and all programmation we can set up, we can filter what we want to receive. So we might even be open to more information, and we screen it quicker. So we have also adapted our mind. So we will be more efficient. So fatigue, yes and no, as long as we filter it, and for the healthcare professionals, as long as they can get access to what they need, we are on the safe side. They will not consider, or I will not consider being spam when I receive high level of content.
Okay. So you won't necessarily be fatigued by something that you want and something your needs. And I think that for me is an important point. Andrew, have you got any quick comments on this? I need to keep an eye on time.
Yeah, I just think if this was in May, we're already in July, so it'd be interesting to run this survey again and really get an understanding of whether the dynamics of this has changed dramatically. But I think I probably would say that people are more fatigued now than they were when this survey went out in May of this year. I think there's a number of points around this. I think technology is evolving, and the engagement using the technology is getting much better. So, and the people on the attendees on this call, I'm sure what they were producing 3 or 4 months ago to what they're producing now is enhanced incredibly. So this space is certainly evolving and getting better. I've seen some really high quality work coming out more recently than some of the stuff that was starting in the beginning. But this whole connection that you get from virtual versus face-to-face, and the fact that the information you're retaining is quite different, and the way you're retaining it is quite different. I think people are hungry and ready to make the change and go back to face-to-face, but there will always be a place for virtual. We're going back to Stephane's point that there's certain things that probably will stay virtual, and certain things where there's a real need to be face-to-face as well.
Perfect. Okie dokie. Let's go back to the questions and let's move into the more formal part. And again, I must try and make us as brief and as to the point as we possibly can. And it was Alex who coined this phrase in the last couple of days, like any good psychologist does. What have we gained? What have we lost? And Stephane, can I come to you first? Do you have any sort of bullet points, observations on the winners and losers over the last few months, relevant to meetings and events?
Thank you. I think we gained a lot. We gained a lot because we had to innovate, and being creative, I would say, is key. So we got pushed to be creative. So we learned how to use a technology, even if we knew it a little bit, but it was quite unknown, and we had to react quickly. We had to adapt, and we have to define a new way and new business model as well. I also think that thanks to technology, we will be able to run, I would say, and share education to all healthcare professionals, which is key. It will definitely increase the attendance, and we have seen that with many congresses. When the registration fee is free of charge, the number of registered people was booming, and we had clear sample with EAN. From a regular physical meeting with 6,000 people, it went up to more than 30,000. So you reach an enormous number of people which you could have not imagined in the past. Then EULA as well got a very nice experience and a very good feedback from the attendants with paying registration actually, and it went up as well. And I hope that for ESL it will be exactly the same. So more attendance, you share education, and at the end of the day, it's a benefit for all of us, because if the science reaches the right people, then we will be diagnosed earlier, treated earlier, better for our health.
So you've reached a bigger audience, if you like, and been able to do. And is that directly membership, or has that included people that maybe aren't members of ESL as well?
We have made an initiative to, I would say, to boost our membership. So we got more members definitely due to the digital aspect. I would say gain. People who were not able to travel for financial reason, they got prime access to the content as well. So there is no one left on a side, which is key as well. It's fair for all of us. What we lost is this contact, not the interactivity, because the challenge currently is to keep interactivity even if it's digital. So what currently happening today with the webinar, we are talking to each other, but we are missing something. Unfortunately, yes, we heard 2 days ago, but I'm sorry, I would have preferred to shake hands with you guys. I'm sorry, but we just adapt ourselves, and for sure, at the another, we'll be meeting each other, and we'll be more than happy to share. Again, it's about share a glass of wine and talk about this webinar. This is, we are missing the contact, the informal coffee and talking about a problem, fixing a problem at the office, something like that. This informal chat is missing for me. But from a science point of view, as long as it's well organized, we deliver what needs to be delivered.
Sometimes seeing creativity. You may have sort of in part answered some of the earlier comments. Do you have anything to add to this?
Breaking up a little bit actually, Mark. So obviously, yeah, it might be just me at my end, but I'm not quite sure. But I think in terms of what we're gaining at this present moment, I mean, we touched on a number of these points in terms of we're taking learnings, we're applying these learnings in terms of the technology, the way that we're interacting with our customers, we're interacting with our colleagues, employees, and everything else. The technology has certainly moved on significantly, and I think that's a big gain. and how people are applying the technology and the learnings that we can take from that from the future, I think would be a big gain. And the part that we're losing out on is that human interaction and the way that business is done. But also, there is data that shows that people, the way people gain information, the way people use information is better from a face-to-face point of view, particularly around the adoption of drugs, for example. So, there is some data that sits behind this that actually says the face-to-face environment is a better environment to do business in, and the outcomes from those meetings are more productive versus what's happening in the virtual space. So I think there's lessons learned, but unfortunately there's lots of things that we are losing in terms of that personal interaction and the benefits that are derived from it as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think one thing which we need to be careful not to do is to polarize the two disciplines of meeting,
absolutely,
face-to-face. And I know that probably that's not our intention, but it may sometimes sound like that. I certainly think the tools that I'm using currently to interact virtually are absolutely then going to be used within the context of the face-to-face programs as well. Sometimes to make them better, sometimes to provide viable alternatives. And the sheer pace, and anybody who keeps abreast of the funding that virtual platforms are receiving on a almost now daily basis can see that the fund companies are spending quite a lot of time looking at those platforms that are out there and trying to fund them to take them to that next stage and to make the overall communication better rather than just the individual.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The integration of these platforms and the way that we use them in the future and how they are utilised within the business community, I think will certainly change the way that we do business in the future. I think that's a benefit.
There's a few questions being asked around, a specific around when we're likely to meet again. So I'm going to jump to this graphic. You can see a reasonably modest survey set. This was a survey we've been doing over the last few weeks and months, linked to some of our fun quizzes that we do. We do a fun quiz on compliance, which doesn't seem to work as a sentence, but there you go. People seem to enjoy it. Nonetheless, we asked the question: when do we think your customers, in terms of clients, be that corporate, meeting stakeholders or medical societies, when do they think they're going to travel? Now, ignore the title at the top, which is incorrect. So when would people likely travel? And the options were 1 month, 3 months, 6 months and 12 months. Bear in mind, this was done over a really fast moving time period of even a few weeks. And what was clear was, when I could see the micro data, is that people became more inclined to push the deadline back and be specific when they became more clear about what COVID-19 was. And as we started to see more data about its effects, people became much less bullish about restarting immediately. So what I thought I'd do is, and I will interpret this for people that are looking at a recorded version, you can see some numbers on the side here. If you as participants just want to bob into the chat, whether you believe you are a 1, 2, 3 or 4, that could be quite interesting for us to just get a holistic look at. From the panelist point of view, and from wherever you are coming from, when do you think we're likely to see meetings starting again? And then, Stephane, I'm going to ask you a question about planning for 2021 and maybe some of the work you could be doing, because that's a question people are asking as well. So, Andrew, I actually thought we'd start with you first. When do you think we're going to start seeing physical meetings happening again, or is that impossible to tell?
I think you put a slide up, I think, Mark, around the different meeting types. I think that has an impact over when meetings will start again as well. I think obviously you're going to be talking with Stephane around congresses specifically. And it also is down to a geographical impact as well. So certain countries are ahead of the curve on this and been quite bullish in terms of when they believe live events can take place versus what's happening within the UK environment. I noticed one of the questions was asking, what's happening in the UK. And there's a lot of lobbying. I'm actually part of a lobbying group in the UK around getting guidance from government in terms of when meetings can take place again. We know that meetings can't take place now. There's a feeling that small meetings of up to 10 to 30 people will probably come in line before the end of this year. But in reality, face-to-face meetings of any size or nature are not going to start occurring in the UK until Q1, Q2 next year. And in Europe, Germany's ahead of the curve on this. Germany are quite well advanced. They're already starting to move forward, and the Netherlands is exactly the same. So you're going to have to take a view by view, a country by country view of what you are able to do in each of these specific markets. But if you're looking at an industry as a whole, I would say, if we get a vaccine, that might change things, and obviously that will change everybody's view of the world. But as we sit here today on the information and knowledge that we've got, I would say end of Q1, Q2 next year is really when the market and the industry will start moving again in the direction to the volumes that we're used to seeing.
I'm going to go to Stephane now, and then Alex, I may come back to you and talk about, you know, individual confidence, when people are going to feel that confidence step, because I think confidence has been pushed to the edge for a lot of people in terms of just traveling generally. But let's come to that. Stephane, what are your thoughts from a medical society perspective?
Clearly, until November, I do not see that we will organize big congresses. For me, it's too early, and there is this fear of second wave. I would say popping up kind of. So from an ESL point of view, there will be no physical event until November. December we have none, so it's done until the end of the year. However, we will get the learnings from what will happen end of August, and we will apply to deliver conferences in November digitally. The only thing that will happen is we will set up a studio to create this interactivity with our Secretary General and Vice Secretary, and they will come to Geneva to really share and debrief and engage debates. So they will be coming to Geneva. So the months I would say I would travel now, they belong to those 20%, and they also they are so engaged for the community, so they also want to bring something. So I'm fully with Andrew before end of Q1 2021. Too risky right now. But in September we might have another idea. If there is a vaccine, if everything is safe, then it might speed up everything again.
And we you know, I see a picture across other industries, and we have somebody we're working with at the moment that are running 25 meetings in Q3 and Q4 in European hub destinations, you know, for between 75 and 100 people per meeting. When they asked their potential meeting delegates whether they would like to do a virtual interaction as a replacement, 94% said they prefer to wait until they could do physical. Now, they haven't, you know, completed the registration process, but I think with that type of feedback, there's going to be these kind of outliers as well as the mainstream. I think the mainstream, looking at the chat conversation, a lot of people seem to be veering towards, you know, being more comfortable to travel, you know, around 12 months, and if there's a vaccine. But again, I would say from this data set, it was interesting watching how people changed. The more information they got, the more their view changed. As simple as that. It sounds kind of obvious, but I think in the context of something happening so quickly, it's significant. Alex, do you want to jump in here?
Yes, so interestingly, I'm thinking from a psychological point of view, and obviously I'm a behaviour change psychologist. If you think about habit formation, we have spent 3 or 4 months, most of us, forming new habits of how to keep ourselves and our communities safe, and that means not meeting face to face. What we need to be doing now is actually undoing the new habits that we've just formed, which takes some time. And I think we need to then learn new habits, and that comes about through, you know, actually doing things. So that information kind of flow, the more information we've had, I think people have taken it more seriously. They've realized why we need to behave in the way that we need to do. And it's going to take us sharing that information flow backwards again to say what the benefits are going to be of meeting again and why we need to do it, and that it's safe, and getting those feedback loops over and over and again. And I think it's going to take some time, but it's almost through the doing that that we'll learn how to readapt to, I hate the phrase the new normal, but the new normal.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So I guess the hint there is go on holiday, then run a meeting. It's kind of not as, I don't want to simplify things, but I think
I think that there's,
when you're more confident. Andrew, do you want to add to
yeah,
this?
just going to say, I think there's another piece to this as well. One, there's the confidence of the people attending the meeting, and obviously, I think Alex quite rightly says in terms of having that that mindset change of going, right, I want to do this and I want to do it now. And the other piece is business confidence in terms of the due diligence and the confidence of companies actually sending delegates or they're inviting customers to events as well. So there's two parts to this whole situation at the moment. One is the ability for people to go and do it. The other is the confidence in them to go and do it. And the other part is, will their companies let them do it? I think is the other part we've got to put into consideration to this as well.
So let's try and just get some quick fire kind of observations around what we think a successful meeting is going to look like, while people continue to give us some idea about their travel preferences. Let's start with Andrew, you first. So if you think about what a successful meeting is going to look like in some pretty snappy bullet point forms, what do you think that's going to be?
A virtual meeting, you mean, Mark, or a socially distanced meeting?
Physical meeting when they return in 20.
Yeah. I think if they're not, there's two parts to this. If it's social distance, then people have got to create engaging environments for these meetings to take place in. I think if you just think you're going to have people, you know, 1.5 meters apart or 2 meters apart, sat at tables with masks on, and having a presentation made, then it's not going to happen. So, you know, I think for us to be ready to make these meetings as engaging as possible, the business environment has got to be an environment that people want to go into, and they've got to be confident and comfortable to go into it. And that's going to take a little bit more time to create those environments, and a lot more thinking around it, not just around the content of the meetings, but also the physical environments that people are going into.
Brilliant. Stephane, can we get your thoughts on what a successful meeting is going to look like, and maybe you can just throw in some top line ideas about what you need to think about when planning a meeting in 2021, for example.
Actually, in terms of success, if currently, right now, in a digital environment, we have the same, I would say 75% of our current Congress attendance, it's a success. And quite a nice success, because everyone was thinking of, if we reach 50% of our regular attendance, it's already a success. So 70% would be super. Then I'm still convinced that we will have currently 75, I split it in 75% and 25%. So having a success meeting in 2021 for me would be 75% of the current attendance, physical attendance, and 25% digital. That would be a success. Then if we have a high success, it will be 75% of the current attendance and 50% of it digitally speaking. And a wow will be equally physical and digital.
Makes sense.
And in terms of planning, I'm currently planning exactly the same number of people. In 2021, all space that we have rented out is exactly the same as for 2020. I have no doubt on that.
Is that based upon a goal you intend to reach, or is that based upon a survey and some feedback you have from your membership?
It's based on the engagement and kind of feedback that you hear from people, because we all want to get out. We don't want to stay home. We have enough. So we want again to see each other. So there is so high motivation, so high excitement to touch the posters again, being in the marketplace again, being able to share. It's all about that.
Okay, Alex, and then I'm going to throw in a few of my own thoughts, and then we can finish off maybe with a little bit about what a kind of a COVID secure meeting may look like, and then Peter, it's back to you. Alex.
Okay, I will try and be brief. So if I'm looking at face-to-face meetings, basically, then I think we have to be doing all the things to make them successful that we don't get from the remote and the digital. We need to make sure that they're providing real value for people to actually want to attend them. And what does that value mean for these people? Is it about innovation? Is it about networking? Is it about, you know, that creative share of ideas? I think I was saying to you a few days ago that economists refer to this serendipitous knowledge transfer that you get, which is when human beings meet, it's the kind of the side of desk bit. It's not the normal day job. It's not the information that you meant to convey. It's about those serendipitous moments that we have where we get really excited about something that the other person said and we bounce off each other, or when we're having a coffee together and we then start talking about something quite separate, so that those conversations become far bigger than the sum of the parts. So yes, I think we really, really need to home in on that human connection element to make face-to-face meetings really successful.
You know, I would certainly, when I think about a previous hat I was wearing as head of events, I was aware of the organisational effort it took to attend as many meetings as we did, and frankly spend as much money as we spent. And I'm actually quite looking forward to there being a change after this lockdown, whereby when somebody makes a decision to attend a medical society meeting or any meeting, that they have much more of a critical eye on the reason they're going, so that the participant can be pushier when it comes to the meeting originators to make sure that what they're providing, as you just said, is exactly in line with them. And from the meeting provider's point of view, we're working even harder to make sure that the content and the experience we're putting together actually is in line with what these people need. I think when I think about, you know, attending events such as ASCO as a great example, and I'm going to use a visual example here. First year I attended, the agenda book was probably about this big. By the time I'd stopped attending that meeting, it was, my fingers just aren't big enough. The amount of potential information you could take in that one physical location just really wasn't credible, even for a 4 or 5 day stay, which is increasingly what HCPs are telling us that they just don't want to do. So I think, if anything, for me, if it changes physical meetings, I think it can only change them for the good. Looking at the Q&A, and I'll come back to questions again, just very quickly going to look at something about social distancing. I'm just going to come out of the presentation to do this, forgive me, because I think this audience, from what I can see, maybe isn't as close to some of the things that have happened over the last few weeks and months when it comes to the change around COVID-19, how the meetings and events industry has really tried to address it. So when I finally get Zoom working in the right way, I'm going to do an executive summary. So this slide here, essentially we've got, really for me, sort of two perspectives. One, what's been happening in lockdown, and what starts to happen now that one could argue we're now starting to come out of lockdown. So in lockdown, organisations like the World Health Organization, and certainly we've been tracking this, have been issuing their own guidance to the travel industry, and by definition through that the meetings industry. With that type of guidance about how to unlock and provide a safe environment. You have brands that we can see here, but also individual brands that have created really sophisticated, as I call it, COVID secure, meeting spaces. That means that quite often now you'll find meeting venues working with organisations such as SGS and Clean and Safe, which are sanitisation and health auditing companies, so that they can try and build that level of confidence, which I think is the piece in the middle, not the barrier, but potentially the enabler. So that if you're booking a meeting and you're considering liability, which is a whole nother webinar we could get into, if you organise a meeting particularly for, let's say, customers, who holds the liability if there is any, sickness and ill health that maybe can be attributed to that travel. So there's a whole liability piece which sits behind the meetings and events industry, trying to provide as safe an environment as possible to allow physical meetings to happen. Coming out of lockdown, what we're finding is that corporate travel policies now are starting to be more specific about how internal people should travel. So realistically, for many large corporate organizations, their employees cannot travel often until even Q3 next year. Most have a freeze until the end of this year. many have a freeze until Q1 next year. So, you know, it's not practical to consider a meeting being organised yet until those corporate travel policies start to reflect the efforts that have been made to make things secure and build that level of confidence. And then I think there is this safety and liability. It's not sexy, and it's not necessarily, you know, meetings and events, which are often about engagement and relationship. But certainly where you're organising an event, it's clear that you do have to think about liability. And just as an example of that, this client I mentioned who has 25 meetings, currently we have identified over 70 individual questions that they need to ask and to have answered by a meeting venue to allow them to say to their participants that they believe they have gone through the right level of due diligence. So even when we're organising meetings, I do suspect even if we drop social distancing and don't require ourselves to be sitting a metre apart, I think there will be a longer term legacy of needing to consider health and security of the individual at the same time. So I think there's going to be that level of change that comes through in the context of an evolving mix. I think what we're missing, and what I hope we can gather over the coming weeks, is more and more data. Certainly when meeting stakeholders, those like medical societies, and certainly corporate organisations start sharing their plans and their ideas, we need to see more of that. If we can see more of that, then I think we can start looking at innovation to address the changing face of the future medical meeting. With that, Peter, I think unless there's any Q&A you've picked up or questions you have, we could call that a day.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. We have run over slightly, but I think that was really important and stuff at the end, as they were. Overall, it was a lot of very, very good content in there. Someone needs to just mute yourselves, guys. Sorry. Sorry. I think overall that was an absolutely fascinating discussion, and I know we overran a bit, but some of what you said right at the end there is just really important, practical stuff. Did you just want to mention this one finally, Mark, and then let's wrap up? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to act as the agent for Dr. Alex Morris, because I know that, and I first sort of had interaction with her around this document, which can be accessed, and definitely via my LinkedIn profile in the next few hours, but even via the Radisson Meetings group, which Alex worked with to talk about the psychology of meetings. I think it's a fantastic read, which is absolutely relevant now as it was then, looking at the participants and how you need to address the way that they think and act in terms of a meeting environment. So I promised I would do that for Alex, and now I feel like I have.
Excellent, you have. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up fairly quickly, but a huge thank you to you guys for coming along. And I hope I'm right in extending the invitation to anybody watching to reach out to you via LinkedIn. That's the easy way of doing it, make contact with you. But that was really, really interesting stuff, and I think it's interesting times. It will be very interesting over the next few months to see how this all pans out. So I'm just going to wrap this up with my sort of usual finish, as it were, for the video, just to say thank you. And for those of you watching this video, it's one of a series that we've recorded at our MedComms Forum in July 2020. You'll find all those videos and much more at NetworkPharma TV or in the MedComms YouTube channel. So please do check them out. And bye for now. And I am going to ask you, Alex, to wave as I finish the recording. So bye-bye.